potential. And so this is just the start. It's the first meeting. And we're so lucky to have Taryn here with us to present and kick off the first meeting, and stay tuned for more opportunities in the future as well.
And Taryn, would you like to introduce yourself as well?
Yeah, of course. So hi, my name's Taryn. I'm a third-year medical student at the University of Washington School of Medicine up in Washington State. And yeah, I found this group, well, through Akila. I joined a mentorship Facebook group, and then she reached out to me and was like, hey, I have this Slack group. Do you want to join? I was like, yeah, sure. I'd love to join. And then ended up being contacted by someone else who was like, hey, could you do a presentation for our group about, kind of topics in like being an early pre-med student and being in high school and that kind of thing. And I was like, yeah, sure. And so after I presented that to that group, then I was like, well, I took the time to put together this presentation. I want to try to see, I don't know, I'm sure there are other people out there who might find this helpful. So I reached out, was like, hey, do you want me to present this presentation that I put together? So yeah, so that's kind of how this came to be, just because I enjoy doing this stuff a lot. And it's a good break from all the medical school stuff, and nice to give back a little bit. So I enjoy doing this kind of stuff. But yeah, I can get started whenever you're ready, or we can wait a few more minutes.
Yeah, I think we're good to start. I'll just keep letting people in as they show up, but we can get started.
All right, I will share my screen. All right, get that started. Okay, so this is a presentation, like I said, that I put together. And I also got a bunch of questions that you all sent in when you were signing up for this. So I'm gonna try to answer those kind of throughout, and then also hit on some of the questions that I feel like maybe I didn't cover as much towards the end. And then there'll also be time to, hopefully time to ask live questions at the end. But yeah, this is all just based off of my experiences being a pre-medical student, and just kind of things I've learned along the way that, what I wish I'd known when I was sitting in your position. And yeah, just things I wanted to share that I think might be helpful to some of you. And just want to open with a disclaimer that this is just my perspective. I'm only one person. And there is no one way to get into medical school, and there's no like universal set of advice that will guarantee that you get into med school or anything like that. So just take my advice and really anyone else's with a grain of salt. Like, take what you find useful, ignore the rest. Okay, so a little bit about me. I've wanted to become a physician since I was a little kid. Actually, my dad asked my pediatrician when I was a 9-10-year-old child, what's a good medical school to go to? So it's literally, it's pretty much what I've wanted to do my entire life. And I feel like I kind of lucked into it, because when I was little, I was like, oh, doctors help people and I like to help people, so I'll become a doctor. I feel like a lot of little kids do. But then I found that as I went along, I actually really enjoyed like the science behind it and working with patients and all of that. So I just got kind of lucky that, I had no idea what it really meant to be a doctor when I was a little kid, but I just so enjoyed it and wanted to pursue it as I grew older. Just giving you a 10,000 foot view of my process, and also making myself sound really old. But I graduated from high school in 2012. I went to college from 2012 to 2016, and then I took 2 gap years. One was intentional, one unintentional. We'll get to that later. From 2016 to 2018 while I was applying to medical school. And then I started medical school in August of 2018. And like I said earlier, I'm currently a third-year medical student at UW. I live in Spokane, which is in Eastern Washington, with my significant other and my 2 cats, one of whom you might hear in the background right now, and I apologize if you do. And yeah, as far as like future hopes, dreams, plans, goals go, I think that I want to go into pediatrics. I really enjoy working with kids so far from my experiences. And, it's really important for me to be able to establish a good work-life family balance. And then I also really want to continue teaching and mentoring pre-med medical students, residents, because I really enjoy that kind of thing. All right, come on. There we go. Okay, so now I'm going to go a little bit over my journey to med school and just kind of take you through the different stages to kind of let you know what I did at the different points in my life, just because I think it's, it can be helpful to hear people's experience. So like I mentioned, I graduated in 2012 from high school, and I put up here like what AEP classes I took, and just because I know people ask about that. And then also my extracurriculars. So from the time I was like 6 until 16, I was heavily involved with dance, like ballet and that kind of stuff. And so that was like my whole life outside of school for that point. But then I decided that I wanted to try something different and got involved with drama club and was in a bunch of plays in 11th and 12th grade. And then also in 12th grade, I took on a few leadership roles. So I was the vice president of our National Honor Society Club and the drama club secretary. And like I said, kept being in the plays. And yeah, I mean, I think one interesting thing to point out and kind of tied to some questions I got was I didn't really do anything that was super like medicine oriented in high school. I just did the things that I enjoyed, and that was good enough to get me into college, along with my grades and everything. So yeah, I think just it's totally possible. You don't have to like get super involved in a ton of medicine things early on. I think it's great if you have the opportunity to and you're interested in it, but you can, you should do all the things that you want to do while in high school, and this will be kind of a theme throughout. Okay, so then for undergrad, it was 2012, 2016. I just kind of put down like the main class series that I took each year. So first year I did Gen Chem and the calculus series and also some writing classes I had to do. I started out my activities. I started out with volunteering, non-medical volunteering through a club at my school. Then my second year, I took the biology and organic chemistry series. I was also working as an RA for my school, and I did like an engineering summer internship that had nothing to do with medicine, and kept volunteering through that club. Initially, I was a biology major. I think I declared that at the end of my second year, but then my school came up with a biochemistry degree at the beginning of my third year. So I switched over to that, which I now regret. So more to come on that later. But yeah, I became a biochem major. And so then third year, I took physics series. I took an anatomy class, molecular biology, a biochemistry class, and a bunch of upper level chem/math classes. I was also working as an RA, did another engineering summer internship, and that year I began doing more healthcare related volunteering. So I was info desk volunteer and then a surgical liaison at a local hospital, and also volunteered at a homeless youth shelter over the summer. And finally, my fourth year, I took the second of the biochem series. I did undergraduate research and took more upper level chem classes. Also took an MCAT class to help me prepare for that. And yeah, I didn't work as much, but I did do teaching, was a teaching assistant for like a quarter. I did more shadowing that year, and also got really involved in a clinical volunteering program called the Health Scholar Program. And then I also was a Premed club officer and leadership team for that clinical volunteering program. So I was very busy my fourth year. And yeah, I definitely recommend trying to space things out a little bit more. But yeah, that's what I did. So then after I graduated, so I got my BS in biochemistry and started an assistant resident director job, which meant that I was overseeing the resident advisors, which I'd previously been, doing when I was in college. I took my MCAT in July of 2016 and also submitted my application to 15 schools. December 2016, so in the middle of applying, I became the program manager for the volunteer program that I'd previously been a part of, and started overseeing that. Then in January to March of 2017 is when I did my 2 med school interviews. I got rejected from one, waitlisted at the other, and then eventually, didn't get into the waitlisted school. So I had to apply again the next year. So in June 2017, I reapplied to 14 schools with some more shadowing, not much, and also the program manager job. Those were the big differences between big differences in terms of activities I added between the 2 years. And then January 2018, I interviewed at UW and was accepted. And then I started medical school in August 2018. And now I'm currently in my 3rd year. I'm started my clinical rotations a couple weeks ago and currently doing an internal medicine rotation. All right, so I'll delve more into my experiences and like reapplying and that kind of stuff kind of throughout this process. So, bear with me, but definitely if you have questions, feel free to add them to the chat and then I'll make sure to try to circle back to them at the end, or you can just write them down and save them and you can, tell me your questions at the end. All right, so now we'll get into the part where I talk about some misconceptions that I've had and what I've learned along the way. First, I'm gonna grab a quick drink of water. Okay, so misconception number 1, I think this is a super common one, is becoming a doctor is the only way to be involved in medicine. I, for some reason, had this strange thought that if I couldn't get into medicine and I couldn't become a doctor, that I would become an engineer, which is ridiculous because I did not enjoy the engineering work that I did. My reasoning was I was good at science and math, so I'd be okay with it, but I just really did not enjoy the work. And what I've come to realize along the way is that there are a ton of careers within the field of medicine that don't just involve becoming a doctor. So I kind of listed out a bunch of different ones. So kind of the classic ones you think about are Doctor of Medicine or MD, Doctor of Osteopathic Medicine or DO. Those are both doctors. They're just slightly different flavors. Physician's assistant, nurse practitioner, registered nurse, certified nursing assistant. Those are kind of the classic ones that I think most people think about. But then there's also this whole umbrella called allied health professions that involves everything you see here and much more. There's a lot of different ways that you can still be involved with taking care of patients and, engaging in human anatomy kind of science that doesn't involve going through all of the schooling and the debt and everything that's involved with medicine. So this is not to discourage you to not go into medicine. I mean, clearly I learned all this and still decided that I want to become a doctor. We'll talk more about why later, but I just want you all to know, in case you're like me and think, well, if I can't become a doctor, I have to go into a completely different field, that there are plenty of other options. And I've had a lot of friends who somewhere along the way, they started off as pre-med students and then they found something else that they enjoy even more at some point in time in their career. So one of my friends, he's starting dentistry school soon. Another one of my friends is already a nurse. And I even have a friend who was volunteering and decided she didn't even want to go into medicine. Now she's going to become a lawyer and wants to focus on kind of medical topics within law. So important thing is that you explore all your options through things like volunteering, shadowing, informational interviews, which is where you sit down with someone in that profession and talk to them about what their life is like, career fairs, etc. And don't be afraid to change your mind. Don't feel like just because you've always been pre-med and that's what you've always imagined yourself doing that you can't always change to something else if you find something that you are more passionate about or that aligns better with your life goals. Okay, second misconception, you have to be a science major / hard science major to get into medical school. So I mentioned earlier, I started off as a biology major and then switched to biochemistry, in part because I was encouraged and also had this misconception that you have to be in like a serious science major in order to get into medical school. And yeah, most of those pressures were coming from like my dad, who's an engineer. He's not even a doctor, but he was like, yeah, you should go into biochemistry. It'll make you more competitive. And yeah, what I've learned is that you can literally major in anything and get into medical school as long as you take the prerequisites. So I, now being in medical school, I have friends, I have plenty of friends who were like biochemistry majors like me, or did like biology or physics or whatever kind of science majors. But I also know people who were history majors or art majors or music majors or whatever, and they still got into medical school. So just for some context, the medical school prerequisites are you have to do general or inorganic chemistry series, which by series, it usually means it takes a full year. You do biology, you do organic chemistry, you do physics, plus or minus some upper level math classes, and then usually some kind of social sciences or humanities classes like psychology, English, etc. Note that these are like just kind of generic requirements, and certain schools may have additional course requirements like biochem, anatomy, genetics. Like there was this one school that I was really interested in applying to, but I found out that you have to have like taken a dedicated genetics course, and I didn't because I was in a biochem major and had a bunch of other chemistry classes to take. So yeah, just make sure you're keeping that stuff in mind if there's like a school that even at this point, like really early on, that you really want to go to, take a look at like what kind of classes they require to make sure that you hit on those requirements before you get close to applying. So yeah, advice number 2, pick a major that you enjoy. You will enjoy your life so much more. Like I really wish that I'd stuck with biology. I think I would have been just as successful at getting into medical school, and I would have had a much better experience because I would have been taking the classes that I was interested in and actually enjoyed, rather than these upper level chemistry classes that I really did not like at all. So yeah, definitely do what you enjoy. And this is going to be a theme throughout, but I think it's really important that you know that you don't have to be a certain kind of major to get into medical school. All right, misconception number 3. You have to do blank extracurricular activity to get into medical school or to stand out on your application. You can insert anything into that blank, like research or, writing a publication or whatever. What I've learned is that you should only participate in the activities that you enjoy doing while preparing to apply to medical school. This is, again, in the theme of pick what major you enjoy, do the things that you enjoy. There is a couple caveats to that, which I'll get to in just a second, but really, you should do whatever you need to do to keep you going on this path through medicine. So what I've learned is that the purpose of the extracurricular and working activities that you do in undergrad is that first you need to show that you know what it's like to be a doctor and work with patients through physician shadowing and also clinical experiences. Second is that you are committed to serving others via volunteering, either clinical or non-clinical is really great to have as well. And then finally, to demonstrate your interests and passions both within and outside of the field of medicine, whether that's research and publications, leadership, teamwork, mentorship, teaching, and the things that you like to do for fun. Medical schools, believe it or not, want you to be a well-rounded person who has many interests outside of medicine. And actually in my one of my medical school interviews, they asked, the very last question they asked me is, what is the most fun thing you did in the last year? To which I answered, I went and saw some musicals with my sister and both of our significant others, because I am a huge theater nerd. So yeah, make sure you continue to do the things that you enjoy, not just to like look good, like a well-rounded person in med school, but also to like keep yourself sane and happy. And I get this question a lot, or like, people think, oh, I have to do research to get into medical school. In particular, or really any of these things. But the thing I'll say about research is what I've come to believe is that it is not a hard absolute requirement to do research to get into medical school. The caveats to that is, first, you should do research if it's something that you're passionate about or interested in. You do you. You definitely go do that if that's something you enjoy and want to do, or if you're not sure and you want to try it out. Second is, if you have any interest in doing an MD PhD program, you have to do research in order to get into that, from my understanding. So make sure you do research for that. Yeah, but other than that, or if you want to do research in medical school, even if you're not doing an MD PhD, or if you're trying to get into some crazy competitive school like a Harvard or some other Ivy League, you probably need to do research. But if you're not interested in any of those things, then I don't think you have to do research. Again, this is just my personal opinion, but I did research, not because I enjoyed it, but because I thought I had to. And I put it on my application, but I never spoke about it in any of my secondaries or in my interviews. It just didn't come up. So honestly, I don't think it was an important factor for me getting into the school that I want to go to. And I don't want to do an MD PhD or do research in medical school. So that's why it wasn't as important for me to have those experiences. But I really love mentorship and teaching. So I did have a lot of those types of experience and have continued to do those things because eventually down the line, I would like to, probably step into some kind of formal teaching role, or, be a mentor for medical students in some kind of professional capacity. So with all that rambling, there was a good question about how do we get these experiences, which is great. Great question to ask. And it's definitely one of the harder things to figure out. So first tip is do your research. Literally how I found my clinical volunteering and my non-clinical volunteering and stuff was just through Googling, what kind of opportunities were available in my area, reading up on the opportunities, and then figuring out how to apply, who to contact to get involved. Even so for example, when I volunteered at the homeless teen shelter over the summer, they didn't have a formal volunteering program or anything. So I literally just called them up and was like, hey, I'm interested in volunteering. Can I get involved? And they were like, yeah, sure. And I had to, do some paperwork and such, but they were totally happy to have me, even though they didn't have a formal volunteering program. Second tip is to get involved with stuff that you enjoy. So a lot of my opportunity, especially my work opportunities, becoming an assistant resident director or becoming the program manager for volunteer program, was because I got involved as, a participant at the earliest level. And then they saw how good I was at, what I was doing, and that I was passionate and excited about it. And then when I went to apply for more leadership positions or the assistant resident director, I didn't even have to apply for it. They just straight up asked me hey, would you be willing to do this? We really enjoyed having you as an RA. So, just getting involved with stuff opens so many doors and opportunities that you wouldn't, I never expected to be the program manager of the program that I got involved with when I started. But it happened to work out that way, and it worked out well for me. Yeah. So third tip is asking people I think some of the harder ones are the ones I get questions about a lot, or shadowing. Shadowing is really hard to get. I definitely, if you don't have a physician in your family, which I didn't. So going to your family, your friends, your supervisors, even your own doctor. So one of the doctors that I shadowed, I got because I went with my mom to her doctor appointment with her permission, and literally asked her doctor, hey, do you ever let students shadow you? Can I shadow you sometime? And he was like, yes. So, just the worst, the best thing you can do is just ask, and the worst they can say is no. And usually it's because there's some policies that they can't, or they don't have time, or blah, blah, blah. It's usually nothing against you. So just don't be afraid to ask. And there's a question about research. I think the best way to get research is to get to know your professors by going to their office hours, getting help from them, working with them on extra projects and stuff. And yeah, if you develop that relationship, then you can start asking them like, hey, do you do any research in this field? I'm super interested in this. And again, kind of using those connections to get those experiences. And then last but not least, cold calling and cold emailing totally works. So that's how I got my research experience. I emailed both of the biochem professors at my school. One of them who I had classes with, the other one I hadn't, and was like, hey, I read up on your research. I'm super interested in, this thing that you're doing, even though I wasn't super interested, but, ignoring that fact because I thought I had to do research. And yeah, both of them responded. I met up with the one that I hadn't met yet, and we ended up talking, and yeah, she invited me to be in her lab, even just not knowing anything about me. So yeah, just don't be afraid to reach out and ask. Like I said, the worst they can say is no, and it's usually nothing to do with you. One thing, sorry, I forgot to mention back on this slide is, or 2 slides ago, I guess, is I said you should only participate in the things that you enjoy doing while applying to medical school. And then I said, you need to do physician shadowing, clinical experiences, and volunteering. If those, those are kind of, I feel like those 3 things are like the hard requirements that you do have to do to get into medical school, and all the rest of the stuff is kind of like, do it if you want or if you're interested, but don't do it otherwise. And if you're sitting here thinking like, man, I don't really want to do those 3 things, maybe consider something else outside of medicine, because yeah, I do feel like those are the requirements, and hopefully you should enjoy doing them if you want to go into medicine, because that's a lot of like what being a doctor involves those things. So just a little food for thought. Anyways, point is, there's no one activity that's going to make you stand out. Like I've read only about 30 or so people's applications, and even in that small pool, they all start to sound very similar. I feel like there's no one thing that you can do unless you're like BFFs with Barack Obama or something like that. Like maybe that would be interesting. But other than that, people kind of, there's only so many things that you can do. So don't worry about like, oh my gosh, I need to stand out and do all these crazy things like, teach skydiving to penguins in Antarctica or anything like that. Like just do the things that you enjoy. And, I think the rest will kind of fall into place as you go. All right, another quick drink of water. Misconception number 4, you have to go straight from high school to undergrad to medical school. What I've learned, gap years are awesome. So if you're not familiar with the term, a gap year is when you take a year or more off where you're not doing school, and instead you're doing something else. And you may be like, well, what would I even do in that time? I definitely had that question when I was in your guys' shoes, and the answer is really anything you want. Gap years are a great opportunity to gain work experience and save money, to do the things that you don't have time to do in undergrad, like getting in your volunteering or your clinical experience or research or whatever. It's a great time, I guess I said, when you're not in school, but also you can go back to school if your grades need a little boost through either, it's called a post-bac program or a master's program. They do have like programs that are like 1 to 3 years that can help you take some of those hard science classes and help boost your GPA if that's what you need. Give yourself some dedicated time just to study for the MCAT while you're doing nothing else. And also do fun things like travel, spend time with family, engage in your hobbies, relax. I wouldn't say you should do only fun things during your gap year, so you should definitely try to do some productive things that'll help further your application. But honestly, you can do anything. And when it comes to work experience too, it doesn't even have to be in medicine. Like I've known people that, worked for Teach for America for a year, or was, doing all kinds of, someone was like a videographer, which has nothing to do with medicine. So you can really, engage in your passions, do the things that you want to do, make some money, get some experience, and yeah, still get into medicine. So yeah, there's no one path to medical school. You do what works best for you, whether that be going through gap years or going straight through. Like I have, I'd say most of my classmates or people that I know did do 1 to 2 gap years like me. But then I also have friends who went straight through from undergrad, from high school to undergrad to college or to medical school, and they're completely happy with their decision. I also know people that had a completely different career and went back to medical school in their 30s or 40s. So yeah, there's really no one right way to do it. You just have to figure out what aligns with your interests and goals and kind of where you are in your life. Okay. Last misconception is you can't become a doctor because of insert really any reason here. So for my personal story of this, so I told you guys, or I mentioned earlier, how it took me 2 application cycles to get into medical school. And when after the first application cycle and I got rejected, I met with one of the directors of admission for one of the medical schools I applied to. And in that conversation, in reviewing my application, trying to figure out, what can I do better to reapply, she told me you should consider something other than medicine, which was really heartbreaking and not the thing you want to hear when you are dead set on going into medicine and trying to figure out how you can be better, to be told like, no, you should give up, basically. So that was probably the lowest point in my journey through medicine thus far. And it was really hard because, especially director of admissions, you think, if anyone should know who can get into medical school, it would be them. But I, spent a lot of time reflecting on like kind of the mistakes that I made while applying, and talking with my friends and my family and, mentors and people that really knew me better than this lady who was she was literally reading my application as we spoke. I'd never met her in person, and she was basing these opinions off of, these interviewers who I talked to for all of 30 minutes, who somehow decided I was unfit for medicine, and basically came to the conclusion that they were wrong. I know myself better than them, and, I believe that I am a good fit for medicine. I just didn't do a good enough job of representing myself during my, application process. And so I decided to apply that very next cycle, and I got in. So, and this all goes to show, like, you can get into your dream medical school, even if the director of admissions at your dream medical school says you can't get in, because I did it. I mean, that's one person, not a big sample size, but, it kind of goes into like I feel like everyone runs into some obstacle while they're applying to medical school, whether it's getting bad grades or a bad MCAT score, they have to fail or drop a class, they take a leave of absence, they're a non-traditional student starting over from scratch. Maybe you're a first-gen student or someone who's the first one applying to medical school within your family, like I was, having like personal family issues, having to work while you're in school, facing discouragement from family, friends, etc., or even getting rejected from medical school, even multiple cycles. I have a friend who's just like the most kind and brilliant and wonderful person, who's going to make an amazing doctor, and it took her 3 cycles to get in, which is crazy to me because she's just amazing. But despite all of these obstacles, or any obstacles you can think of, like, you can still get into medical school. So excuse me. So yeah, really, once you've decided that becoming a doctor is a path for you, don't let anyone convince you otherwise, especially yourself. Even after I made the decision, like, yeah, I'm going to reapply this next cycle, I still had crazy amount of doubt, and definitely was not confident in my ability to get into medical school. But I've seen a lot of people, including myself, overcome a lot of different things, a lot of different setbacks on the path to medicine. So I truly believe if you want it bad enough, if you're willing to work hard enough, like, yeah, it's, if you're facing some of these things, it's going to take more work than maybe someone who isn't facing these things. But I honestly still think it's possible to get into medical school despite, a number of different setbacks. So hopefully that, I guess, I don't know, bolsters your confidence in yourself, helps you feel a little bit better, that, you know, you can overcome what you're going through and, you know, still get into medicine. Okay, so to kind of wrap things up, I titled this section, What Should You Do Next? Remember, this is one person's opinion, but I just wanted to give some tips, depending on where you kind of are in your med school, pre-med journey to, you know, because you get a lot of advice and it's hard to know, okay, what should I be doing now? Okay, and I do want to make the caveat, you all are obviously being a pre-med during the time of COVID. I'm not a pre-med during the time of COVID, although COVID has definitely impacted my medical school, you know, experience in ways that I never anticipated, but, you know, really just do what you can, but try not to stress too much if your original plan is, you know, is not working out, because times are very different these days. And yeah, you just don't add that extra stress, like do what you can, but know that medical schools will be understanding when it comes to applying. Especially, it sounds like a lot of you are like high school, early college, so you definitely have time to, you know, catch up on some of those things later on. Okay, so these are my recommendations. If you are a high school student who is interested in becoming a doctor, your number one priority should be getting good grades and getting into college, literally any college, doesn't matter which. You can go to community college first, you can go straight to a 4-year, doesn't matter, just, you know, get into college. Number 2 priority is continue doing the activities and hobbies that you enjoy doing. Like I mentioned before, I didn't really do anything super medical oriented when I was in high school, and I got through just fine. So really, you know, if you have the opportunities to do that stuff and you want to do it, great, do it. But otherwise, don't, you know, stress out too much about getting those experiences in, which is kind of priority number 3. If you have time, start to explore your interests in these things, but don't stress if you can't get to them, especially during COVID times. Like, that should be the last thing on your mind. Okay, so what about if you're about to start your first year of college? First off, congrats on getting in. Super excited for you all. First priority, relax, enjoy. However much time left you have before school starts, you know, do some fun things. Don't go pre-studying, don't go crazy with extracurriculars. Just give yourself some time off before you jump in. Second priority, get good grades by developing good study habits early on. And I have a slide about some study habit tips that I'll get into in just a few minutes. But really, your main focus early on should be doing as well in those preliminary classes as you can. And then priority number 3 is you can start to get involved with extracurriculars, but just start with like 1 to 2 things. Don't go too crazy and try to jump into everything at once. And again, make sure that you're doing the things that you enjoy. All right, if you're in your second year, again, take some time to relax before starting back up again. Second priority, continue working on getting those good grades, and really think about like how you did last year, and you know, kind of determine what worked, what didn't, what do you want to do differently this next year. And then priority number 3, start or continue engaging in those curricular activities, particularly the ones that help you learn more about the field of medicine. And then if any of you are 3rd or 4th year college students, this is more geared towards those early college and high school students. So if any of you fit that box, let's chat. I'll be sharing out my info later. So yeah, we can chat more. And I also have another talk that's all about like applying to medical school. So if there's interest, and if the med forward people are cool with it, I'm happy to give that talk at some future date as well. Okay, so a couple resources that I recommend. The AAMC, who's like the kind of the governing body of at least MD schools in the US, has some great resources for like exploring careers in medicine, also for learning about like what are the requirements to apply to medical school. If you're starting to look at like what schools you might want to attend, there is a resource called the MSAR, or Medical School Admission Requirements. That's really helpful for looking at that stuff. And then for just like general advice and support, you know, keep being in the Slack group and whatnot. I really find Reddit to be helpful. There's like an R Premed subreddit and our MCAT subreddit. that I've generally found to be really supportive, nice environments to, you know, get advice or commiserate and whatnot. I do recommend avoiding the student doctor network. If you don't know what I'm talking about, close your ears. You have never heard the word student doctor network. But if you do know what I'm talking about, I've heard, I didn't really use it, but I've heard it can be a little bit more of a toxic environment. So, you know, just avoid toxic communities in general. You don't need that throughout pre-med. Okay, so now I have like this list of questions that was compiled for me. Maybe, let me see if there are questions in the chat.
Yeah, there are quite a few that came through.
Okay.
It's up to you which ones you want to answer.
Yeah, so maybe I'll prioritize those ones since I don't know if other people or who submitted these, and then maybe we can get into some of these later. Does that sound okay?
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay. I will real quick in case any of these, I did have a few prepared slides that I wanted to touch on that I think would be helpful. So one of the questions that I was asked was about study habits and tips. So my kind of very general tips are start early, study often. So if you know you have a test next week, start studying for that now, or start studying like several days in advance. Don't wait until the day before. Hopefully you're not, but you know, do a little bit every day rather than trying to cram it all in a short period of time right before the test. And really prioritize, like learn to do, you know, learn how to allocate your time appropriately and figure out, okay, I have a paper due tomorrow and a test due next week. You know, you still need to do both things, but you need to figure out, you know, get the things you can get out of the way first and then focus on, you know, kind of the study things that can take longer and don't have a set time period. You know, you have to manage your time wisely. Ask for help when you need it. Super important. I was like, I don't know. I feel like this is another common thing is like, oh, I don't want to ask for help from my professors because I don't want to seem dumb or like I don't know what I'm doing or blah, blah, blah. Honestly, the best thing you can do is ask for help. Like I, especially later on in college, was like constantly in my professor's office being like, or in the tutoring center at my school being like, I don't understand this. Can you help me understand this? And it was actually really great because it helps you develop relationship with your teachers or professors and lead to some of those other opportunities later on down the road. So yeah, it's actually like they want to help you. They want to answer your questions. So really, I would definitely like ask for help when you need it. It's not a sign of weakness. In fact, it's a sign of, you know, that you are very introspective and know when to ask for help. Because that's super important throughout your life and especially in medicine. Active learning is better than passive learning. So you'll see this nice colorful learning pyramid over here, which I thought was really interesting. And they bring it up a lot in medical school. But really, this is going over like how much people retain from different types of learning. And so I think some of the common things that people do when they're learning is like going to lectures, reading the textbook, you know, watching some videos. But really, the things that help you retain the most information are these things down here. So practice doing, so like doing tons of practice questions, I highly, highly recommend. That's one of the best ways to test your knowledge and apply what you learn to different scenarios. That and teaching others, like I love doing group work. And oftentimes in undergrad and medical school, we would get together as a group to like work on homework or study for a test. And we'd like go around and ask each other questions, or maybe we divvy up topics and someone would do a quick talk on like, hey, here's how I think about this topic. And, you know, really, I knew that I really understood the material when I could teach it to someone else. So highly recommend you check out some of those practices rather than just like rewriting your notes or rereading the textbook, because those aren't the best ways to retain that information. But ultimately, you got to find what works best for you and recognize when you need to try something new. Like I was, my very second test of medical school, I was like one point away from failing, which was a huge wake-up call that what I was doing at the time was not working for me, and I had to like completely revise my strategy within a very short course because we have like weekly tests in medical school throughout the first 2 years. So yeah, I had to like completely change up what I was doing and really started doing more of those like practice things, like practice questions and flashcards and whatnot. And I ended up getting my best score on any medical school test ever, I think, that very next test, just by changing that up. So went from, you know, nearly failing to doing really well on the test just by, you know, incorporating some of those more active learning things. So those are my quick tips when it comes to studying. And then there's another question about like healthy lifestyle choices. I think I've harped on this a lot, but continue to make time for the things that you enjoy and the things that keep you going on your journey to becoming a physician. Like I do talks like this because I enjoy it, and it helps me reflect on how far I've come and really motivates me to keep going. So even though, you know, maybe I should be spending this time studying or doing something else, you know, to further my medical career, I think it's important for me to take time out of my, you know, pretty busy schedule to do things like this because I enjoy it, and it makes me, you know, it makes me go back to the material with a new sense of motivation. So find that thing for you, whatever it is, and keep doing it. Someone asked a really interesting question about like, what are some of the harsh realities of, I think they said a pre-med or medical school. I just wanted to go over a few things that like I considered and some of the things that I've thought about when deciding, okay, do I really want to go into medicine? Because there are a lot of good reasons not to become a doctor. And so I'm going to go over some of the cons that I have experienced or thought about and some of the pros just briefly, and I promise I'll get to your questions very soon. So some of the cons, I mean, medical school and just the medical education process is a long time. And sometimes it can feel a little like you're putting your life on hold because like, oh, you know, a lot of my friends who are my age are like settling down, they're buying houses, they're, you know, having kids, they have a job where they're actually making money, whereas I am paying money and, you know, can't do a lot of those things like buying a house and such because I don't have the money, B, don't have the time, C, have no idea where I'm even going to be living in the next, you know, in less than 2 years, I could be on the other side of the country. So I can't really do those things right now. And sometimes it sucks because I'd be like, yeah, it'd be nice to have my own house and know where I'm going to live and, you know, actually be making money. And, you know, on that, you incur a lot of debt when you're going through medical school. And also it takes a while before you actually start earning money and having like done a job where I earned money before med school and then going into, you know, where I'm now paying lots of money to go, you know, do work essentially is hard. But yeah, it's a hard thing to swallow, but something you have to accept if you're going to go down this path. Also, being a doctor is kind of like providing customer service on steroids, in the sense that if any of you have ever worked, you know, with people, patients and their families are still people, and you're seeing some of these people at sometimes the worst points in their life, and that can lead to a lot of emotions, a lot of difficulties. So yeah, I think it's important if you want to be like a practicing doctor who sees patients, there are opportunities to get out of that realm, but you know, you have to recognize that you're going to have to be dealing with some difficult people in some difficult situations. There's a lot of bureaucracies in medicine, like you know, people making rules who are not really in medicine, and you have to follow them, and that can be frustrating. And also, you can't help everyone in the ways that they need to be helped. Like, you know, you can do everything in your power to like fix them up from a medical standpoint and get them going, but you know, sometimes they are homeless and they don't have access to their medicine that they really need to stay healthy, and they just end up back in the hospital, and that can be super frustrating as well. And all of these things really lead to physician burnout, which is a huge and sad deal, but it's definitely, you know, it's definitely a thing within medicine and something to recognize. However, with all that being said, for me personally, I think the pros far outweigh the cons, which is why I ultimately decided to go into it. So, you know, from my perspective, the pros are like, yeah, you sometimes deal with people at their worst, but you also get to work with some really like wonderful people whether they be patients or other healthcare providers. Just like some of the most like kind and genuine and smart people that are just really a joy to be around. And it's really great working, knowing that you have helped someone through potentially the worst part of their life. You're constantly learning, you're constantly learning new things, and like medicine's really evolving all the time, which is really fun to keep being challenged in that way. Obviously, there's good income potential and job security post-schooling, so you spend a lot of money, but then you make quite a bit of money after the fact, and there's always a need for doctors, so you're going to have a job at the end of it, assuming you make it through. Also, you don't have to just be a doctor. I say just because like totally nothing wrong with like just seeing patients and that, if that's what you love doing, but there's so many other things you can get involved in, which I was really excited about because like I said, I really love teaching and mentorship. So I can be a teacher for other doctors while still practicing medicine and seeing my own patients, which is super exciting. And finally, you get to make a positive impact on many people's lives. Like that's just an ultimate life goal of mine, to do that. So, I think there's a lot of potential for that, not just my patients, but also through helping, pre-med students and medical students and whatnot. And yeah, it's just it can be a very rewarding job. It's a very hard job, but it's very rewarding, at least from my limited, probably naive perspective. But yeah, those are just a few things that I wanted to go through. But now, okay, I'll stop jabbering and actually get to your questions. Okay, so first question, what did you do in the Health Scholar program? So Health Scholar program, I'll try to keep this brief because unfortunately it's only in certain areas. Like right now, it's in like the Seattle area, and then Eastern Washington, Spokane area in Washington. It's in Hawaii, and there's a ton of sites in California. I think that's it right now. They might have added some more, and I'm just not familiar, but those are the main places it's at. But it's a volunteer program that more or less trains you to be like a CNA, which is certified nursing assistant. So you're volunteering, but you can do so much more than just a regular volunteer. Like you get to feed, bathe, change, walk with patients, take their vital signs, and just really get that hands-on experience. And it's a really nice program if you can participate, because you go through like a training and you take some tests, but it's not nearly as intensive as like an MA program or an actual CNA program. So if you want more information, feel free to reach out to me. I'd be happy to talk more about it. How has my med school experience been impacted by COVID? Yeah, so earlier this year, I took a test that's called Step 1, which is like kind of the MCAT equivalent in medical school, except there's 3 of them. But anyways, it's the first big test you have to take in medical school to kind of move on to the next level. And so I was already off from school from January until mid-March this year. And then to prepare for that test. And then I took it in like mid-March. But then I was supposed to start my clinical rotations at the end of March. But because of COVID, we were not allowed to go into the hospitals. And so basically we had 3 months of like mostly online like elective type classes rather than getting into clinical rotations. And then we finally started those back up on June 29th. So basically we missed out on like 3 months of clinical experience, and like all of our rotations that we do got a bit shortened, but ultimately I'm not too worried about it, because these rotations in third year really are about like exploring what you want and figuring out, getting your feet wet, so to speak, and kind of figuring out like what you like, what you don't like, and obviously learning along the way. But I don't think it's gonna ultimately I should graduate on time, barring any other big lapses. If we get pulled again, that might affect things. But yeah, that, and also like we have to wear masks all the time and be like really cautious, more cautious than you would be normally in the hospital, which has been interesting. But yeah, I'd say those are the big things. If you can go back to freshman year, what would you change, improve? Would you choose to apply senior year or take a gap year? Yeah, awesome question. I think I would definitely try to spread my experiences out more. Like you saw, I did a ton of stuff my 4th year and not as much stuff. I wish I would have like gotten into some of the like shadowing and that kind of stuff earlier on, or like maybe during the summers when I had more time. I think that would have been helpful. And yeah, and again, not switching my major, doing the things that I enjoyed, not doing like research and that kind of stuff because I didn't want to. And I still would definitely take a gap year. I thought it was super helpful to get that work experience. And actually, we talked about my gap year job for like 50% of the interview that got me into med school. So I think that experience was super important for me, just to learn and grow and develop as a person. And I was able to save up quite a bit of money, which has helped me not have to take out the maximum amount of student loans throughout med school, which has been really helpful. And yeah, ultimately, I'm glad that I had the gap years. Like, obviously, I didn't want 2 gap years and reapplying sucks and everything, but you know, I definitely don't regret taking those years off. I think they were really helpful for me. How did I get shadowing experience? So I kind of touched on this, but first I tried like cold calling or emailing a bunch of places, specifically places with pediatricians, because that's what I was interested in. And unfortunately, I didn't get anywhere with that. And so then I went to, I do have an aunt who's a nurse, and I asked her, like, hey, do you know any doctors who, you know, I could shadow? And she had one friend who was a hematology oncology doctor for adults. So I initially like didn't go to her because I wasn't really interested in that, but then it got to the point where I just needed to get shadowing, so I was willing to do anything. So yeah, I went into that experience, and I actually found it really fascinating, and really you know, I liked it a lot more than I thought I would. So that was good. And then the second one, yeah, I basically went to my mom's doctor appointment with her and was like, hey, mom's doctor, can I shadow you? And he was like, yes. So yeah, but there's also like, I applied to like some shadowing programs and stuff that just didn't work out because of timing and such, but there are things like that too. What is my most memorable volunteering or shadowing experience? Oh, that's a good question. And I actually wrote about this experience in my applications, and I think might have talked about it in my interviews at some point in time. But so when I first started the Health Scholar program, the first shift that I did was like a shadowing shift where I worked with a student that was already in the program who's like supposed to show me the ropes and whatnot. And I remember we, yeah, so we like, first you go in, you check with the nurses and you ask like, what can we do? And, you know, they had us like take some vitals or, you know, do a couple tasks. But then we went back and checked with them and they were like, yeah, we don't have anything else for you to do. And what we've been trained to do is when you run out of like explicit tasks to do, the best thing you can do is go start talking to patients and, you know, even just chit-chatting with them about their lives and like keeping them company really like helps them, you know, feel more cared for and have a better experience. And so, yeah, but I was like following this other more experienced student. And we were walking around a little bit and I was like, hey, so should we go like try to talk to some patients now? And she was like, no, I don't like to go talk to patients. I'm kind of antisocial, so I just walk around until the nurses give me something to do. And I was just like, oh, okay. I thought that response was super weird because, yeah, it was just like, that's not what we're supposed to be doing. And so like, I walked with her for maybe a minute or two more and I was like, this kind of sucks. I don't want to just walk around. I want to go actually talk to patients. And I was like, you know what? You can keep walking around. I'm going to go talk to some patients. So yeah, so I went and just like visited really the first patient. I checked with the nurses first, made sure it was okay. And I ended up having this really lovely conversation with this older gentleman who hadn't seen his family in a while and was a bit lonely, and it was just really nice. Like we just talked about his life and you know, for like 30 minutes, and yeah, I just, you know, I could tell that he really enjoyed having someone just to talk to and be with. in that moment. So that was really impactful, because first it was, kind of emphasizing that it's really important to be proactive in your experiences, because I wouldn't have had that experience, that, really nice conversation with him, had I not gone out of my way to seek that experience. And then secondly, it's important to remember that, just talking to patients and spending time with them is really meaningful. And, I didn't fix whatever health problems he had come in with, but I know that I made a difference in his experience, even if it was just a small one. So yeah, I'd say there's a lot of more, memorable experiences, but that was one of the like very first ones that stuck out to me. Is it good to start as a nurse in case you aren't sure in becoming a doctor but are still interested in the medical field? Yeah, so nursing is a really different path than becoming a doctor, in the sense that you generally do like your first two, like basically nursing school for the most part is like built into your 4 years of undergrad, rather than being like a separate thing where you do 4 years of medical school, or sorry, 4 years of undergrad and then go to medical school. And kind of the issue with it's not impossible to go from like doing nursing stuff to go into a doctor. Like, people have certainly done it. But the thing is, like, oftentimes with the nursing classes, it's like nursing biology or nursing chemistry or whatever. It's not the same level of difficulty as the like pre-med classes. And so a lot of schools won't accept those. And so you'd end up having to retake those classes. So what I would encourage you instead, if you're not sure, is to really try to do some of that, shadowing, or even just talking to people who are nurses or doctors to find out, like, figure out what you're really interested in, and kind of learning about the differences in the different roles if you can. So yeah, that would be my best advice. So, like, what factors did I consider when choosing what med schools to apply to? Excellent question. I think I got a question in my list of questions that was like, what is the number one factor that you should consider? And honestly, I think that this is going to sound super repetitive from the rest of this talk, but the number one thing you should consider is, where are you going to be happiest? Like, seriously, what environment is going to be most conducive to your learning and your well-being? And that's something I considered very heavily. Now, there are a lot of components that go into that. So some of the other things I considered were the location, the cost of living, how big the program was. Like, is it 60 students versus 200 students? What kind of requirements the school has, because like I mentioned before, I don't really like research, so I didn't want to apply to schools that were like, you have to do a research project while you're in our school, because that just wasn't going to be a good fit for me. And ultimately, the school I got into is the school that I decided to go to, but I'm really happy that that's the school I got into, because it's closer to family. Like, my school is closer to family. I'm living in a lower cost of living area than I was when I was an undergrad. There's way less traffic. Like, they seem like silly things, but really they make such a big impact on your life. I live with my significant other. We've been together since the beginning of undergrad. So considering like his opportunities for like finding a job and that kind of stuff. And I wanted a smaller program. My program only had 60 people versus like the main campus had like 100 people, which makes a big difference. So yeah, a lot of things that go into it. I think it's just figuring out what's important to you, and don't apply to schools that you don't want to go to. Like, if you really don't want to live in Florida, don't apply to schools in Florida. It's pretty, hopefully pretty straightforward. Did you end up networking with doctors or med centers to get your experience? How did you do it? Kind of. I don't know that I talked about my shadowing, my volunteering. I mostly applied or like reached out through contacts. But yeah, it's really just, I did speak a little bit about like, how I got my jobs. I think that's the biggest way I used my networking is like, I did the like entry level position and I did a good job, and then I was able to apply. And they like, it's much easier to get an opportunity when people know you. So like, I've heard of a lot of people who work as like a medical assistant or a scribe or something like that, and then and work with doctors, and then they go turn around, or like even in the House Scholar program, like you get close to some doctors and they see that you're a good student, and then you ask if you can shadow them, and they're like, yeah, because they already know you're a great student. So really just, I'd say, get involved in the things that you can, and then just, constantly be trying to do your best, and just like asking lots of questions, being very curious, letting people know what your goals are. Like, I remember one, when I was starting a new floor in the Health Scholar program, I told one of the nurses, like on my first shift, she was like, oh, what are you interested in? And I was like, oh, I want to go into medicine. And she's like, oh, my son's a medical student. Here, let me call him for you. And so I got to talk to a medical student that way. So like telling people what you're interested in, I think is a really good way to start building those connections. And then if you do a really good job, like they'll people will want to help you and help, get you involved with the things that you need to get involved with. What strategies do you use to cope with stress? What study methods have worked for you? I talked about study methods. Hopefully I kind of answered that question, but yeah, coping with stress is not easy. And I'd say that was also a big obstacle that I faced during undergrad is like I'm someone who has anxiety and also have dealt with depression both in undergrad and in medical school. And, those conditions can make it really hard to cope with stress. And so things that I find really helpful are, first making sure to continue doing the things that I enjoy, talking with people when I'm feeling stressed. And I have a number of different people that I talk to. So like when I was in undergrad, I used the counseling services at my school. And I went and saw a counselor every week, pretty much throughout second to most of my fourth year of college, because I was just under so much stress. And it was so nice to be able to go and talk to someone who was a professional and could give professional advice. And, and it's nice, it's nice to talk to family and friends and people that but it's also really nice to talk to a counselor because all they care about is you. You don't have to like hear about their stresses or anything. You're just there to talk about you. So I definitely recommend counseling. If you can, especially when you're an undergrad, because oftentimes that stuff is free and then it's not when you're beyond that. So like take use of that while you can. And then just, being able to talk to the people in your life when there's stressful things going on and being able to advocate like for what you need and telling them what could be most helpful. And that's hard. It's something I still struggle with. Like if you ask my significant other, he'll tell you that I'm not the greatest at always being like, I'm stressed, and they'll, manifest as me being more sassy or, a little more snippy or whatever. But really important to just let people know what's going on with you. Don't be ashamed or, if you are dealing with these things. Like I was very worried about going into medical school, having anxiety and having dealt with depression, that it would make me like less qualified to be a doctor, or that, I don't know, I guess that I wouldn't be a good doctor because of these things. And and then I had to like hide these things about myself. But what I found is that when I opened up and talked to my classmates, especially, I found out a lot of them also have anxiety or depression or other medical issues like I do. And we can commiserate and support each other. So I think being willing to talk about those experiences, even though it's hard, is really helpful. And just knowing that you're not alone going through it is also really helpful. Did I apply for any summer programs to help me prepare for medicine? No, not any explicit summer programs. Like I did some summer engineering stuff. I think the Health Scholar program was super helpful. I did that kind of year round, so it's not explicitly a summer program, but I think, it's definitely important to use your summers to like get in the things that you don't have time to do during the rest of the school year. How do you balance personal and school life? I think I've talked about this. One thing that I was surprised to learn, and I think, you all will be happy to know, is I actually end up having a lot more free time in medical school than I thought I would, which has been helpful. And also just like, I try to only study as much as I need to. Like you know, I've gotten to the point where I can recognize when I'm like not really, like I'm studying, but I'm not really studying. Like I'm just clicking through things, but I'm not actually like thinking about the material, and being like, you know what, I'm just going to stop studying now because I'm not actually learning anything. I'm just clicking, and being able to recognize that. So yeah, I think that's an important thing, is like you could keep studying forever, but at some point you're going to stop learning things because you're too tired or whatever. So yeah. How did I study for the MCAT? How many months of dedicated did I do, and when did I start? So I did an MCAT class, prep course. So I started off like a year before I took the MCAT. I got a set of books and I tried to do the self-study thing, but I found it really hard to concentrate on and like balance MCAT studying and like regular school studying, because I was in my 4th year of college at that point, taking some ridiculous chemistry classes that took a lot of my time. So I decided to take an MCAT class, even though they are kind of expensive, but I had saved up money to take it. Yeah, because I wanted help, like, I don't know, it really forced me to prioritize my studying, I'll put it that way. And it was also helpful to like learn from people like different strategies, and you also get access to a lot of materials, like a lot of online question banks and practice tests, which are super important to do. So yeah, I definitely, like, there are some people who just bought a set of books and have the, I guess, resolve to just study on their own and did just fine. So if you're that kind of person, kudos to you, just do that. But yeah, if you need a little help with prioritizing or whatnot, I think MCAT classes can be really helpful. And yeah, so I started studying a year ahead of time, but didn't really do a good job of being like, you know, consistent with it up until I took the MCAT class. So I would say like really you only need a couple months of like really dedicated studying is what I would recommend. What was the process of applying to med school? I feel like as much as I'd love to talk about that topic, it's a huge topic and I have a whole separate talk on it. So I think I'm gonna have to leave that one to a different day because there's just too much to cover. So sorry. If you have any more specific questions, I can try to answer those. Are mentors / guidance counselors important? Do they help? Yes. They can be. So my caution is with pre-med advisors, or with really any mentor, but especially like pre-med advisors, you have to be really careful because they don't know everything. Honestly, I think the best mentors are the, as far as like getting into medical school, are like current medical students who went through the process recently. Because even like doctors who applied like 5-10 years ago, like the application process is so different now than it was. And yeah, and a lot of pre-med advisors, especially, like they didn't go through medical school, so they don't know everything. And even like my school, we had a pre-health advisor. She wasn't even just pre-med, she was pre-nursing, pre-dental, pre-whatever. And I actually ended up getting some bad advice from her, which in part did, I think, contribute to me not getting into my first cycle. It wasn't completely her fault, like it was definitely mostly on me, but I think there are some things that I would have done differently had I not gotten her advice. So it's like with anyone, take anyone's advice with a grain of salt, but it is really important to find people who just like throughout your careers, like not even just getting into medical school, find people who are in the position that you want to be. So like when you're in college, when you're in high school, find someone who's at the college that you want to be at and try to talk to them. When you're in college and pre-med, try to find people who are in medical school to talk to. And like right now, I have contacts who just got into residency within like pediatrics. And so I'm talking to them a lot to figure out, okay, like what do I need to be doing right now to prepare for that? So it's important to always seek out, and also have like doctors who are mentors and stuff. So definitely seek out mentors. I'd say try to stick to people who are actually in the medical field and have done what you're trying to do recently, because they will give the best advice. But yeah. Oh, the next question was, I heard that pre-med advisors aren't very good at their jobs. How was your experience? Yeah, really, yeah, take it with a grain of salt. Honestly, I probably would have been better off not going to the pre-med advisor. But how do you find a mentor? It's really just like asking questions. Like, for example, so when I found my most recent, like this person who's now doing her residency in pediatrics, you know, where I want to be in like 2 years. So my school put on a panel event where they were kind of like this. Well, there were more people, but they were giving advice about pediatric residencies and getting in. And they shared their contact info at the end. And this one student in particular, she went to the same school that I did, had a lot of the same interests that I did. And so I just reached out to her, like had never met her before, just sent her an email and was like, hey, I'm Taryn, I'm a medical student. You know, I heard what you talked about in the pre-med panel. I have some questions for you, and just asked those questions. And she responded. It was super nice. And yeah, and told me like, hey, keep in touch. And I definitely will keep reaching out to her as I need to. So yeah, really just like going to things like this, you know, are super helpful. And if you just happen to meet a doctor or a nurse or whatever person along the way that you think is really knowledgeable and is like where you want to be, just like let them know like, hey, you know, I'd like to exchange contact info with you. I'd like to keep in touch with you. I have some questions for you. And, you know, understand that people are busy and they may not always be able to, but I also feel like there's a ton of people out there who are willing and happy to help. So yeah, it's a mixture of like asking specifically, but also just like, you know, I never asked this person like, hey, will you be my mentor? It was just like, hey, I have some questions. Can I keep in contact with you and keep reaching out? So yeah. In high school, do you remember, what's the question? Oh, sorry. In high school, do you recommend taking any subject stats? Any subjects? I think you're asking if there's any specific subjects I recommend taking in high school. If so, which ones? No, not in particular. Just take what you enjoy. You know, as far as, I did have a question about like someone was asking like, should I take AP Chem even though I didn't enjoy it? And I would say no. If you like don't enjoy something or aren't like super interested in it, don't, even if you're gonna have to take it down the line, because the thing with AP classes, at least when I was applying, is that most med schools, I don't think they'll accept certain AP classes. Like they accepted like my AP literature and language, like English or my psychology classes. They counted those as credits that applied to medical school, but they didn't count like the AP biology and stuff. I had to still take that in college. So I would say that, yeah, take it if you're interested, take it if you want that background. Like I really love my AP bio class. So I would take that again if I went back and did it, but otherwise don't take AP Chem if just because you're like, oh, I need to take chemistry in college. I would not recommend that. Hopefully that helps. What do you think about going to med school in Canada? I mean, I think Canada seems to be a wonderful country, and I have heard, I don't know much about it. I do know that I think it's more competitive because there's only like 12 schools across the entire country, but there's you know, a lot more in the US. I think certainly you may need to have like dual citizen. I don't know if you need dual citizenship actually. Sorry, I don't know that much about schools in Canada, but you can apply. And yeah, I also, unfortunately, I don't know like how it translates, like if you want to do med school in Canada and then come back and do residency here and how that would work. So yeah, I think, sorry, I'd have to recommend you do a little more research, maybe ask on like our pre-med or something like that. Did I use Anki to study for MCAT/college coursework? So for those of you who don't know, Anki is like a flashcard app where you can either download other people's sets of flashcards or make your own. I did not in college or not in undergrad. I don't know that it even existed in undergrad. But yeah, I did use it kind of early on in med school, but then I stopped using it because I just didn't find it effective for me. I just found myself like clicking through it and like not really paying attention, not really trying. And I found other things like practice questions are a lot more engaging for me. So yeah, I would just say like but then I also have classmates who love Anki and like do their flashcards every day and find it really helpful. So if that's, I definitely recommend, you know, give it a try, but if it doesn't work for you, don't try to use it. I kind of already answered that studying for the MCAT question. How did I choose what undergrad school to go to? Yeah, it was similar to med school, like a lot of factors that go into it. So I applied to, excuse me, I applied to three different colleges, which I feel like maybe you have to apply to more now these days. I don't know, but I applied to three. I got into all three. They were all in-state schools because I wanted that in-state tuition. Really the big choice for me was between, so I went to University of Washington Bothell, which is a smaller branch campus of the University of Washington, which is located in Seattle. So those were the two that I was really deciding between, is if I wanted to go to Seattle or if I wanted to go to Bothell. And some of the draws of Seattle is, you know, it's a bigger school. They have a more established, like they have an actual pre-med program, which is versus Bothell didn't. You know, and but ultimately I decided to go for the Bothell campus because one, it was smaller. Like my classes at the upper level chemistry classes, I only had like 10 people in my classes. Excuse me, sorry. Which is great because I got a lot of like one-on-one attention from the teacher. It was really easy to find those opportunities, or easier to find those opportunities, just because like, you know, it's easier to get to know people at a smaller school. Also, Bothell had apartments rather than dorms, and I didn't really want to live in dorms. So that was nice. Yeah, things like that. I just wanted like a more calm experience. Like I was living in a small town. I didn't really feel comfortable moving to Seattle right away. And yeah, so even though it had a less established pre-med program, I honestly really loved my experience there and think it was a lot easier for me to get some of those opportunities that I got because it was a smaller school. So I definitely, you know, recommend thinking about that stuff. I'm interested in trauma surgery. How did you / someone you know find a doc that was more fast-paced? Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, it can be really hard to talk to doctors no matter what you're in. Like I said, I have anxiety. I was very nervous about approaching people. But I think you get to a point where you just kind of have to do it. It's not really good advice, but I think it's important to keep in the back of your mind. The worst thing that they can say is no, and it usually doesn't have to do with you. It's, you know, try not to take the rejections personally. It's generally because they don't have the time or whatever, not because they think you're a terrible student that can't, you know, get into medical school or something like that. So, yeah. Would LinkedIn be a good way to find shadowing? Maybe. I don't know. I'm not sure. I mean, you can certainly try, but yeah, I'm not sure. You try it and get back to us and let us know. I think as long as you you know, approach things in a polite and respectful manner and don't like push it if they say no, I think it's totally fine to reach out or understand that they may not respond at all. And again, that's not on you. So yeah, I feel like it's worth a shot because if it works out, great. But yeah. All right. What was my favorite patient interaction? I feel like I kind of talked about this. What advice would you give regarding communication with patient families and dealing with tough situations? Yeah, that's an excellent question. I definitely think it's something that you learn with time and, you know, with experience. And it's certainly something I'm still trying to learn myself. I think important things are, you know, keeping a clear head and asking for help when you need it. Like knowing when you're getting in over your head, when things are getting escalated and you need to reach out to someone for help or advice. That's not, again, not reaching out for help is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign that you are, you know, smart and know when you need help. So yeah, I think it's hard to give exact advice, but, you know, keeping a calm head, keeping yourself safe is really important. Unfortunately, there are instances where people do get injured in medicine by unruly patients or family members. It's not super common, but yeah, just keeping yourself safe is really important. What's your opinion on people getting clinical experience from chiropractor, assistants, pharmacy techs, blah, blah, when you're not directly interacting with MDs, DOs, but you're still interacting with patients? Yeah, so kind of asking like, is it okay to shadow other people? I think it's okay to shadow other people to just like kind of get your foot in the door if it helps connect you with doctors. But if you want to become a doctor, you really have to shadow a doctor. You know, you can shadow, like get patient care experience, but you really have to, they want to know that you know what it's like being a doctor, not just a chiropractor or pharmacy tech or something like that. So I definitely think that you need to get some experience shadowing with doctors, but you're welcome to have work experiences that are outside of that. Yeah, so someone who said anyone who's looking for a mentor in med school, there's a thing called Prescribe It Forward. Yeah, definitely, like if there are programs out there, I would just say don't pay for anything. Like don't pay to have a mentor, don't pay to like have people read your applications. Like there are plenty of people out there like myself who are willing to read it for free. So like don't, yeah, I'd say just don't spend your money on that stuff. Like find people that are just willing to do it out of the kindness of their hearts. What if you don't have any AP classes offered in high school? Don't worry about it. You know, they're great because it can help you knock some stuff out of the way, but I don't think you'll be like behind or anything when you come to college. So I wouldn't worry about that. What advice can you offer to someone who wants to go into medicine but isn't drawn towards direct patient care, particularly the sight of blood or gore? Yeah, that's a great question. I think, you know, just kind of figuring out what options are out there. I think, you know, there are a lot of things that you can do. I definitely wouldn't go into medical school if you're not interested in that, because you will have to do that stuff, even if like later on you can kind of choose to just do research and stuff, but you will have to deal with that stuff in medical school. So I would recommend going down that path. I would, you know, start trying to figure out what are those options, you know, going back to that list of allied health professions and trying to figure out what might be some options for you. I think there are many wonderful things that you can get into, like social work is super important. Where you know, you said you didn't want to directly work with patients. You are working with patients in that sense, but you're helping getting them connected to what kind of resources they may need, but you're not dealing with the blood and gore and guts and stuff. So that's a really important job that you can, you know, get involved in medicine. Hospital administration stuff, super important, another way to get involved. So yeah, I'd say just, you know, try to do lots of research, like Google different things. And, you know, I would say if you're unsure, you know, it doesn't hurt to try it and to like kind of test yourself, see what your exposures are. But yeah. Okay, so there's a clarification on the trauma surgery question earlier about being in a fast-paced environment. How would you approach doctors? Would they be accepting of shadows in the first place? I think it's really person dependent about, you know, there are certain, like I found it hard. I didn't end up finding any shadowing experiences in pediatrics because there's just a lot of rules because it's dealing with children. And so I had to get my shadowing elsewhere. I would say, you know, don't be afraid to ask because you don't know until you ask, but understand that it's totally okay to get, you know, experience elsewhere. And it's just important to get shadowing wherever you can get it. And then you can really, it'll be much easier for you to explore that later on when you're actually in medical school. Hopefully that helps. Yeah, so this, I believe this session is being recorded and they're planning to post it on YouTube, on the MedForward YouTube channel, correct me if I'm wrong. So yeah, I think if you want to come back and then, yeah, I'll make sure that I send out, I'll make sure you guys get my contact info too. So if you, if I didn't answer your questions sufficiently or you have follow-up questions that you think of later, you can reach out to. Oh, okay. So I think that was all all the questions in the chat right now. Are there any other questions do you have? What organizations or societies do you think are important to be a part of as a pre-med? I think the ones that are important to be involved in, you're probably sick of me saying this, are the ones that you want to be involved with. Like I joined a pre-med club, and I think they can be helpful because oftentimes they'll have like events or speakers, or, you know, help you get involved, or like they'll help you find opportunities. But I would say make sure that it's a supportive environment. I think that's another misconception that I almost put in there, but I didn't end up, is that like pre-med and medical school is like a super ultra competitive environment, and you have to be like top dog, you know, and like bloodthirsty to get in. And really, it doesn't, and it shouldn't be. Like, I personally think that if you want to be a doctor, the more successful way of doing that is building up other people who want to become doctors as well. And like helping each other is far more important than tearing each other down. Because yes, it is competitive, but I think you get better by like helping other people, and in turn it helps yourself too, because they're willing to help you and support you through hard times. I know this is a bit of a tangent I'm getting on, but my point is, if you get into a pre-med space and find it to be very toxic, and people are discouraging you, or people are telling you like you can't go into this, or blah blah blah, you don't need that. And also I'd encourage you not to contribute to that mindset. Like, be the kind of person who wants to help your friends, because like, you know, it can be hard and it is competitive, but I truly don't believe you don't get it. I truly don't believe you get into med school by tearing other people down. I think you get into it by building each other up, and working together to get your goals. Especially because like I've met some of the most awesome people on my journey to becoming a pre-med, and I'm like, heck yeah, I want to work with you as a doctor. Like, we could be doctors together. How cool would that be? So yeah, that's my personal experience. So this question about, like, I've read a bunch of applications, and you know, I mentioned it's hard to stand out. Is it the way that you talk about your experiences in your applications that give someone acceptance over another? Absolutely. More on that in a second. Or does highest GPA and really high MCAT prove that you are more fit? Yeah, so medical schools look for the whole package. Generally how it works is you have to have, you know, a high enough GPA, MCAT for their standards in order to like get accepted to an interview. But at the point that you're at an interview, they already think your grades are good enough. And it's really like, are you the kind of person that we want to be in our medical school? Like, are you a good fit for our medical school? And you're completely right. It's totally how you talk about your experiences. That's how you stand out. And this is a big tip that I give, like when you're writing applications or doing interviews for med school, or really for anything in life, is to use personal stories from your experiences. Like, generally when you're asked a question, you really want to back it up with a specific example. So for example, one of the questions that I got asked in my medical school interviews, and that I've asked people, because I've done a lot of interviewing, like mock interviews for med schools, and also interviewing people in my previous job, one of the common questions is, what is your greatest strength? And then also, what is your greatest weakness? And so the best way to answer those types of questions is to be like, I think my greatest strength is blank. And then you launch into a story of when you demonstrated that strength, because not only is it goes into the whole show versus tell thing. Like, you could say, I'm really hardworking, and you know, I study all the time, and I'm, you know, a perfectionist, and blah blah blah. But that, you know, that's really generic stuff that like anyone can say about themselves. But if you go into an example of, like, let's say you say my strength is being empathetic, and then you talk about some time where you sat down and, you know, talked with a patient for 30 minutes about their life, and, you know, provided, you know, comfort in that sense. That shows me that you're an empathetic person, not just you saying you're an empathetic person. So yeah, that's how you stand out, is by telling your stories, because no one else can tell your stories exactly how you tell them. Follow up on that question about, like, person who doesn't like blood and gore. Would radiology, psychology, or public health and research be a good option for me? So radiology, to become a radiologist, you still have to, if you want to be a radiologist, that still requires you to go to medical school. So I would say no. But there are radiology technologist positions where you're the person like getting the actual exams rather than like interpreting them. So that would be a good option. Psychology for sure, like, you know, getting into like helping people with mental health, super important. Public health and research, also great options. Yeah, and if that person wants to talk more about that offline, like feel free to contact me. We can talk through some more options. Med schools base GPAs and grades from your undergrad years. Yes, that is correct. They don't consider, really in general, med schools don't really care what you did in high school, whether that's GPA or SAT scores or your activities in high school. That really doesn't count. They mostly focus on what you're doing in college. And yeah, it can be undergrad. Also, plus if you do like graduate school, do a master's program, that kind of stuff applies to. In my opinion, what's a safe MCAT score GPA? I don't think I can give you a number, unfortunately, because every school is different. And that's where it's really helpful to look at things like the MSAR that I mentioned earlier, because they will tell you like what the averages are for each school and like what they accept. So yeah, yeah, I don't think I can give you an exact number. It's just doing the best that you can, frankly. And you know, definitely when it comes to applying to schools, you want to apply to schools that like you're within their ranges. You don't want to, you know, if you have a 3.5, don't apply to a school where the average, you know, GPAs are 3.8 to 4.0. So yeah, I think that's more important to think about that. So yeah, sounds like we're about ready to wrap up because I've been rambling far too much. But you know, hopefully I've answered a lot of your questions that you have.
Yeah, we just wanted to thank you so much for sharing all this information. We can't wait for the panel next week, and we'll be sending out more information about that. But if you guys could fill out that feedback form we sent out in the chat a little earlier, that would be great. And thank you so much, Taryn, just for attending and helping us out with this.
Yeah, it was incredibly helpful. I know I learned a lot. I know that from all the questions that were asked, a lot of people found this meeting helpful.
Yeah, good. I'm glad. I hope, yeah, sorry, I talk a lot, but hopefully it was helpful. And yeah, if there are other, I know we didn't touch on every topic that everyone wanted